Hey! Hi! How you doing? This is the Gamertron, and welcome back to the Gamertron Show. I hope it's no secret that I love and adore Titanfall, particularly Titanfall 2. The Titanfall franchise, the Titanfall games, are some of my favorite first-person shooters. They're my favorite multiplayer PvP games. I simply cannot stress enough how much I love and adore Titanfall. And because of that love, I have this bias. I have this part of me that doesn't want to make this video. Oh, and please understand, this video is not clickbait, but it is also not a hit piece, not a pretentious essay. This video is essentially me getting on my hands and knees and begging Respawn Entertainment to stop sabotaging their own creations. The Titanfall games have always struggled keeping a player base, maintaining a community. Don't get me wrong, there's a strong, small, tight-knit group of players that play these games non-stop. Titanfall is their shooter of choice, their multiplayer game of choice. I admire the hardcore players and fans of Titanfall, and I thank them oh so dearly, because it's only because of their participation, them playing the game, that keeps Titanfall multiplayer, whether it be the first game or the second, in a semi-playable state. The Titanfall community is doing their part to keep the Titanfall games alive, despite Respawn's efforts to sabotage their own games. Is that harsh criticism? Yes, absolutely. Consider this tough love. I really do love Respawn. I adore them for creating Titanfall. But it doesn't change the facts, it doesn't change the reality that Respawn have designed the Titanfall games, and in particular, the Titanfall multiplayer portions of these games, to die. They have expiration dates. There will come a point where the very first Titanfall game in its entirety will be unplayable. Sure, you'll be able to buy it and own it, but you won't be able to play it, because there'll be no other players playing it. At least with Titanfall 2, we have the magnificent single-player campaign that will be timeless, historically preserved, because it's a single-player campaign. Can't say the same about Titanfall 2 multiplayer now, can we? Respawn, despite developing multiplayer-focused games, actively refused to add multiplayer community features that would make these games immortal, last forever, completely remove the concerns of a dead player base. Right now, the current and somewhat hypothetical situation is that sometime down the line, the only way to experience, in this case, Titanfall 2 multiplayer will be through the private match beta. Also, let that sink in. Private match beta. Even though Titanfall 2's content and update life cycle is supposedly over, Respawn never technically finished developing private matches, as they are, as you can see, still in beta. That in itself says a lot now, doesn't it? So, back on topic though. So, hypothetical future. Nobody's playing Titanfall 2 anymore. Your only means of accessing the content of playing the game in that capacity is through the private matches, whether it be solo or with friends. To help demonstrate the capabilities, or lack thereof, of private matches in Titanfall, I have recruited for this video expert Titanfall player, good friend, and fellow YouTuber, Game Revo.
You absolute fucking twat.
So, what can you and your mate do in private matches? Well, you can have 1v1s, of course. Mess about with a few match settings, such as health, your Titanfall charge meter, Titan core ability charge time, match score, match time, respawn delay. Really basic stuff. But that's it, it's just really basic stuff. There's no possibility to create your own custom game modes, to enable or disable game mechanics and features that would really change up how you play the game, allow you to get creative. To be fair though, all the game modes, all the maps are here in the private matches, but say you want to play solo or PvE against the AI. Now, while Titanfall has never had proper bots, and that's a major issue of mine that I will get deeper into later, we do however at the very least have the Grunt AI, Spectre and Stalker and Reaper AI, and of course Titan AI. How do you engage with this AI though? Well, through the game modes Attrition, Bounty Hunt, and of course my favorite, the Horde mode, Frontier Defense. Now, Attrition is technically playable solo or 1v1 with a friend, but It's just not the same without a full group of players. Again, it's there, it's technically doable, playable, but it's attrition neutered. Now, Bounty Hunt is completely playable solo, co-op, and 1v1. It's surprisingly casual, cathartic fun. Killing waves of enemies, banking their cash. Bounty Hunt is surprisingly solid. I'm pleased to know and somewhat relieved that at the very least, this mode in private matches is something that can be always played and returned to years in the future. But now what about Frontier Defense, the 4-player wave-based survival horde mode? And this mode in Titanfall 2 is actually what spawned the creation of this video. Because you see, in recording footage for a recent video of mine about my favorite horde modes in video games, I encountered excessively long matchmaking times just trying to get into matches and record footage from Frontier Defense, which has led to the creation of this video. I love this game mode, I love this part of Titanfall multiplayer, and the thought of never being able to play it again because there aren't enough people playing Titanfall scares me, it saddens me. But can Frontier Defense be played solo or in co-op with a friend in private matches? Yes and no. Solo, even on easy difficulty, is a great challenge. Unless you are expertly skilled at the game, memorize all the enemy spawns for every wave, be sure to pick specific weapons and titans, then sure, you could solo Frontier Defense, but it's gonna be a great challenge. But playing Frontier Defense with 2 players, just you and a buddy in private matches, totally doable. And quite a lot of fun, actually. So it's somewhat of a relief that as long as I have a friend who can play Titanfall 2 with me, we can co-op some Frontier Defense in private matches when no one else is playing. That's nice. That's great. But why does it even need to be this way? Why is so much of the multiplayer component of Titanfall 2, and basically the entirety of the first Titanfall game, rendered totally inaccessible, unplayable, without a large, healthy, multiplayer player base and community? Say years into the future, 5, 10, 15 years from now, when a customer attempts to buy and play Titanfall, well, they essentially just wasted their money because there's nothing to play but the single-player tutorial, and you're left with this huge chunk of game that you can't access, you can't play because no one else is playing because the multiplayer community is dried up, dead, and moved on. Now with Titanfall 2, again, there's the excellent single-player campaign that is absolutely worth the price of admission alone. But then once again, you're left with this huge chunk of game, basically the majority of the multiplayer portion of Titanfall 2, unplayable, inaccessible. What are you left with? Attrition, Bounty Hunt, and Frontier Defense private matches, none of which were designed for solo play. And keep in mind, you don't earn XP, you don't level up, you can't unlock things in private matches. So people who buy the games years from now, they won't even be able to unlock all the weapons and pilot abilities and titans. How sad is that? I can't help but question Respawn's design and development decisions here. Why would you develop all this content only for it to become null and void and inaccessible years later? Why would you design the multiplayer components of your games to have expiration dates? Why take the time developing all the assets, building these maps, balancing all these mechanics and weapons? Why make all this effort? Why spend all this money if it amounts to something that no one years from now can see and play and experience and appreciate? Now let's approach this from a different angle. Let's be a bit more fair to Respawn. Say they can't afford it. They can't afford to create extensive community features that would keep the multiplayer portion of the games vibrant and playable, accessible, etc. Then why not open the floodgates to the community? Let the community preserve Titanfall. Give them the tools necessary for proper modding. There's no microtransactions or in-game economy to worry about being compromised through modding. I also think it's fair to say that Titanfall is a fairly casual game, not a hardcore competitive one, so why not give the community the tools to preserve and expand the Titanfall franchise? Again, as much as I love Respawn, adore Respawn, appreciate Respawn, I still, in the end, however, can't help but scratch my head, be frustrated and confused by their actions because, in the end, there really is no excuse. There's no excuse for the limited solo and offline PvE options. There's no excuse for the lack of bots. There's no excuse for the lack of modding tools. There's no excuse for the lack of a proper feeder mode and proper spectating mode as well. Look at this. This is spectating in Titanfall in private matches. Respawn can't even give us a free cam. or options to change the camera FOV. What is this? Now, don't get me wrong, these features aren't 100% required. Some of these implementations come down to the artist's creative vision for their product, but when you design games with a multiplayer focus, advertise them, and try to sell them on their multiplayer, and then do so little to preserve those multiplayer elements so that these games can be purchased and enjoyed years down the line, well, I can't help but find that very questionable. Look at all these other multiplayer PvP and PvE focused video game franchises that still have large, thriving, passionate communities, despite how old these games are. Team Fortress 2, Left 4 Dead, Counter-Strike, Unreal Tournament, Quake, the Halo games, most of the Call of Duty games. All of, if not most of these games have bots or community-generated content provided through the extensive community features these games provide. Modding, custom games, theater modes. All of these games, with a few exceptions, will have all of their content accessible and playable for anyone who buys them right now, years into the future, until the end of time. These games are immortalized, historically preserved, through not only their in-game features, but the communities around these games. There are still active modding communities for Skyrim, Fallout, Gary's Mod, and a number of other video games, single player and multiplayer, have active, vibrant communities that will last forever. So why can't Titanfall? I want to show you all something funny. Do any of you remember the video games Evolve and Battleborn? Infamous for their dead player bases and being somewhat panned by the gaming community? Well, despite their non-existent player bases and the somewhat negative reception they both received, both games are still completely playable. You can access every mode, every character, every map. You can unlock everything. You can make progress in these games, level up and whatnot. Isn't that hilarious though? A critically acclaimed and beloved video game like Titanfall 2 is at risk of becoming an empty ghost town, unplayable, unpreserved, lost to time. And yet games like Evolve and Battleborn with a far lesser reputation are immortal, historically preserved. Decades upon decades later, you'll still be able to play these games and experience everything they have to offer. These games don't even really have extensive community features. What they do have are bots. Since the very first Titanfall back in 2014, I have brought this up again and again and again. I have begged, I have pleaded, I've made multiple YouTube videos, and yet Respawn still denies me, denies all of us. Bots. Just some basic bitch bots. I don't care. I don't need complicated, intricate pilot bots that can wall run and perform all the sick creative moves that players can. I just want them to run around, double jump, and shoot at me while I shoot at them and they call down their titans and I call down my titan. You're never going to be able to truly replicate the Titanfall PvP multiplayer experience with bots. I get that. So don't do that. You don't need to do that. I understand, and I'd like to think that most people who understand have basic concepts and understandings of video game development know that AI in video games are limited in their capacity of what they can do in replicating the actions and strategies of a human being. Respawn, we don't need perfection. We're not asking for perfection. Bots in multiplayer games have never been perfect. They've never been able to truly, fully replicate the player-on-player, human versus human experience. I don't believe that should be expected. What I do believe should be expected is not putting artificial expiration dates on your multiplayer-focused games. Can't or don't want to develop pilot or player bots? Alright, Respawn, fine. In that case, just give us modding tools. Give us proper fleshed out private matches, spectator mode, a theater mode. The Titanfall community asked, no, begged and pleaded with you, Respawn, since the first game to add a theater mode. You make these games that are all about cool action and pulling off awesome tricks and movement and all this stuff. This dynamic, cinematic action gameplay. So why don't you give the community a better means to show it off, showcase it? Or even, God forbid, make Titanfall machinima. It's not like Halo. That other big multiplayer first-person shooter franchise is still around and kicking and popular because of the community and fan creations. No. That's sarcasm. Of course they are. All of these games Team Fortress 2, Left 4 Dead, Unreal Tournament, Quake, Call of Duty, Halo, single-player games like Skyrim and Fallout. Still, after all these years, still popular, still talked about, still played. And not just because they're good games, but because they're good games that let their fans, that let their players, that let their community express their passions for the game within the game. They provide multitudes of incentives to come back and keep playing. No matter how much time has passed, no matter the number of people playing currently, those games will last forever. They are timeless. There is no reason for Titanfall to not be among these games. Especially now with Respawn Entertainment's newfound success with Apex Legends. They're making a fortune off that game, aren't they? Wouldn't really cost much, wouldn't really be that much of a hassle to add a few more bells and whistles onto Titanfall and Titanfall 2 to let the communities keep these games alive themselves. Unfortunately, however, as much as this deeply saddens me, this may just be a part of Respawn Entertainment's design philosophy, that they don't care about historically preserving their games. They keep making multiplayer games with expiration dates. I mean, just look at Apex Legends. Without other people playing the game, there is essentially no game. Keep in mind, this is some of my personal preference and bias seeping in here. I heavily disagree with and dislike the notion and concept and design of multiplayer-only PvP with absolutely no offline AI support. From my perspective, a precedent was made decades ago, with franchises like Unreal Tournament, Quake, the classic Star Wars Battlefronts, the classic old-school Battlefield games, real-time strategy games like StarCraft and Warcraft, with Valve games, with Bethesda games. Like, a precedent has been set. We can historically preserve games. There's no reason not to. It makes your product all the more desirable that I can buy this game, own it, and play it, and experience all of its content for as long as I live. As well as being able to come back to these games and play them time and time again and still have new experiences through the community created content. God damn it, man. Let me tell you all something. Every time I play Titanfall 2 multiplayer, whether it's PvP or PvE in Frontier Defense, I'm having an absolute blast. It's so much goddamn fun. There really is no other first-person shooter like Titanfall. But every time my play sessions with the game are over, that fun, that joy, that happiness sinks and transforms into sadness, and no other video game does this to me. The Titanfall games make me sad because I know one day I'm not going to be able to play this anymore. I'm not going to be able to play these game modes. I'm not going to be able to experience the dynamic, visceral, action-packed gameplay of Titanfall multiplayer because Respawn sabotaged their own franchise. They set these games out to die, and that just makes me so sad. Not just for my sake, but for the sakes of those in the future who will never get a chance to play this, to experience Titanfall. But they will be able to play Evolve and Battleborn. Isn't that fucking hilarious? Special thanks to YouTuber Game Revo for helping me record the footage for this video. Thank you all for watching. If you could leave the video a like, a comment, share it on social media, and maybe send a few bucks my way on Patreon, it would be deeply appreciated. Anyways, that's been a video. I'll see you all later.